The United Nations Security Council held a special meeting this week to examine the situation in Somalia.
Implementation of the mandate of the United Nations.
Familiar face James Swan, back as acting head of mission UNSOM, presented his assessment of significant recent events.
I congratulate Somalia on its election as a member on the Security Council for 2025-2026. This achievement demonstrates the progress Somalia has made over the past 3 decades in its journey from conflict to recovery.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Council. I'm pleased.
Swan described the revisions of the first 4 chapters of the Somali Constitution, the consensus reached by most state presidents and the federal government, but also the opposition of some political leaders and the state of Puntland, as well as Garaway's withdrawal from the federal framework.
I also want to stress at the outset the central importance in all that we do of key.
The next phase of the constitutional review will address complex issues, such as power and resource sharing, under Somalia's federal model. Continued engagement of all stakeholders in an inclusive process will be critical to ensure a broad-based consensus on these important state-building questions. I call on all Somali stakeholders to work together to resolve their differences and seek consensus.
Swan expressed his concern over the ongoing dispute with Ethiopia, over its agreement to recognize Hargeysa's sovereignty in exchange for 20 kilometers of Somalia's coastline for the construction of naval facilities.
I recall that the Security Council has repeatedly confirmed respect for the Somalia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the unity of Somalia. I urge Ethiopia and Somalia to resolve this matter peacefully, in accordance with the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and international law.
2020 through constitutional reform, advances in security operations.
He also covered other issues, including funding for security after the African Union peacekeeping mission finishes its current mandate at the end of the year, proposed quotas for women in government as legislation to alter the Constitution are enacted,
the window to achieve
and the $1.6 billion needed for humanitarian needs operations, a little under 1/4 which is so far funded. Swan also praised discussions on UNSOM's transition from being a UN mission to country office.
Setting the stage to achieve the United States condemns in the strongest terms.
The American representative on the UNSC directed his remarks at security concerns as well.
We welcome the international consensus in support of a follow-on mission to ATMIS, and urge stakeholders to complete initial planning steps as soon as possible. Doing so is critical to maintaining stability while Somalia continues to develop its security sector. Colleagues, the United States remains deeply concerned about political tension between Ethiopia and Somalia, and the negative impact it is having on shared security interests. We join the O and other international partners in reiterating our support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Somalia. Diplomatic dialogue is the way to de-escalate tensions, and the only way forward.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Somalia's UN representative welcomed Swan back to his nation and praised the ongoing negotiations of the reorganization of the UN country office. Once again, security was addressed. He painted a somewhat more optimistic picture of the ongoing efforts to neutralize al-Shabaab. Recent U.S. intelligence reports say that most gains against the terror group have been reversed this year.
In the ongoing offensive operations, we continue the development of our security forces to protect our citizens and take over the full security responsibility from the African Union mission. We are grateful to all friends who are actively assisting us toward the accomplishment of this fundamental goal, that only Somalis can defend Somalia and its citizens, and yet adequate, sustainable, and predictable funding to address the shortfalls of Somali national forces remains a challenge to fast-tempo offensive operations against al-Shabaab.
He then put forward high school exams as evidence that the government is providing services to liberated areas. somewhat curiously including Los Anod, which has not been occupied by terrorists, describing terrible violence there, but not explaining that it was local militias fighting the Somaliland army. Osman accused Ethiopian forces of hostile actions within Somalia, saying they were disrupting the ATMIS withdrawal and threatening peace.
Phase 3 is underway to be finalized by September. Despite the disruptions caused by Ethiopian forces, they have unilaterally altered handovers and withdrawal from FOP's situation in the front line of the al-Shabaab fight without prior coordination with the federal government of Somalia. On the other hand, in the last weeks, non-ATMIS Ethiopian troops illegally crossed our borders from different locations, engaging in confrontation with the Somali security forces. In light of this circumstance, the Somali government must postpone the transition to September and engage with the AU on a timely, orderly drawdown of Phase 3.
He finished by calling Ethiopia's deal with Hargeisa as a memorandum of misadventure. ADN TV will continue to report on diplomatic developments affecting the Horn of Africa.